August 2025. What is so special about August? Well, we're going to see some serious changes in August that has been building up for a long time. Today, I want to deal with a few issues and sort of simplify them and see how they all tie together. One of those issues would be the Epstein situation. The other might be the what's known as the Steele dossier, otherwise known as the Russia hoax or whatever. But the big issue in August is going to be the upcoming defeat of the West by Russia. I expect this to happen in the next 2 weeks. And I also might mention a little bit about the stock market because the stock market is taking it on the chin today. I expect that to be the start of some serious financial turmoil. Getting the stock market out of the way first. It's been obvious to anybody that's paying a little bit of attention whatsoever that the United States has entered a recession in the last 5 or 6 or 8 months or whatever. It was brought on by the increase of the interest rates, putting the mortgage rates up and making it more difficult for everybody to service their debt load and leading to a little bit of a scarcity of money. Real estate market is in serious dire straits in different parts of the country for different very reasons. I've been told by a lot of local fellows here that's working in the trade that things aren't busy at all and it's beginning to get slack. When that happens, there'll be a lot of people caught at the top, holding on to inventory that they cannot get rid of, and that is the way bubbles go. You make a lot of money. If you don't get out in time, you might be left holding the bag, and that's exactly what's happening. Anyway, today there was issued an employment report which was worse than expected. Now, it being worse than expected is no big deal in the bigger scheme of things because what is the big deal is where they revised the figures that were given over the last 2 months to be actually a lot worse than what were given 2 months ago and 1 month ago. So it's pretty obvious to everybody that the recession now has landed. Stock market is down 600 points on the Dow. It's even worse on the Nasdaq, which is heavily influenced by these super companies like Amazon and Meta, used to be Facebook, and all these ones, Nvidia, whatever, Microsoft. They're down. Some of them are down 8%. In actual fact, that's not, in my opinion, as far down as they may go. And this is just my opinion, not advice to anybody. Do whatever you want. I expect them to go a lot lower because a lot of these companies has been laying off a lot of people recently, and it's just the start of the cycle, really. A lot of people in high tech are being replaced by artificial intelligence. Microsoft is eliminating positions left, right, and center. It's not the only one. We are now going into a cycle of deflation in financial assets, at least. Maybe not deflation in the price of food, because that's a different story for a different video for a different day. Anyway, keep an eye on the stock market going forward into August. The only market that's doing very good today is the bond market because the expectation is that now that we're going into a recession that the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates, etc. Take that with a grain of salt because anybody that decides to buy treasury bills or British gilts or Japanese bonds or whatever, I don't believe they're doing the right thing, but everybody can do what they want themselves. But my idea of success is not does not entail lending governments money for 10 years or 30 years or any length of time for that matter. Those bonds will reflect their true value, which is the ability of the governments and the states to pay back the money that is being borrowed. And in my estimation, at least, that ability is non existent because it's too much to pay. All right, that's all I want to say about the stock market. I've said it before in other videos. Get going while the getting is good. Now, getting back to Epstein, the entire thing to understand about this Epstein thing is this just didn't happen yesterday or the day before. Epstein died, expired, or to use the new term now, was made unalive by himself or somebody else. Who knows? But that happened in 2019. Obviously, Epstein was in jail for some years before that. Epstein has been in the news now for about 10 years or whatever it is. Simple enough to understand Epstein. Epstein was a fairly intelligent fellow. He was a maths teacher, which is pretty good. I can't remember now whether he was high school or university or college or something in between. But anyway, he knew a bit of maths, and I admire a fellow that knows a bit of maths. And he suddenly became a billionaire. Well, no matter how good you are at sums, that's not easily done. What you need to know about Epstein is that his sidekick, Miss Maxwell, she's the daughter of uh, obviously her father, Maxwell. He was, well, Maxwell was Robert Maxwell, or his first name, I think it was. Anyway, Maxwell, he was a competitor back in England in newspapers with Rupert Murdoch. One of them had the Daily Star, the other one had the Daily Sun or something, maybe it was vice versa. But they were tabloids anyway. They were not as big like the like Murdoch is today with Fox News and World Global. They were relatively small and back things, but they were in competition. And Maxwell anyway was found floating in the off the end of his yacht or his boat or whatever, fully naked in the sea in the Atlantic, and that was the end of Maxwell. Turned out that he was a Mossad agent, of course, Maxwell, and that was no great surprise to anybody that was paying a bit of attention. It's only common sense that his daughter would also be associated with that, and perhaps Epstein with an Irish name like Epstein, well, he might be involved with them as well. You know what they say. If you're not working for the CIA, you might be working for the CIE. Well, who knows? Anyway, Epstein decided to operate what's known as a honeypot, where he will invite big shots. I won't use the Irish term big knobs because we don't know whether that was actually the case or not, but big shots. To this island down in the middle of no place. It's off the Virgin Islands, down the Caribbean. It's very close to another island, perhaps somewhat similar to the one he had himself, owned by Mr. Virgin himself, uh, the guy with the airplanes. He's another Mr. Branson. He has another island down there called Necker Island, Necker. Who the hell calls an island Necker Island? I don't know, but he does anyway. And he supposedly had a lot of Ukrainian fellows coming and going. And before this war became popular and before everybody became an expert on Ukraine, Ukraine was a place in. People didn't really know where Ukraine was, but it was over there someplace. It was part of Russia or whatever. But it was known for being the center of the far right, the dreaded far right. In the old days, they were referred to as neo Nazis. There would be skinheads and they'd have an idea, a Nazi ideology, but Ukraine was the center of them, and that was their stronghold. Some others were in Eastern Germany and some others were in Poland, but the main place was Ukraine. They idolized a fellow over there that was killed in the Second World War, Bandera or whatever his name was. They still idolize him over there, and they had a brigade till the Russians got rid of the brigade. They killed them all, basically. The Azov, AZOV, Azov Brigade, and their idol is this Bandera, and they're a nasty crew, but they're tough guys, and they are extreme nationalists. So it might be in somebody's best interest to eliminate extreme nationalists in every country, because extreme nationalists will not go with what the agenda may be. And the agenda, as we know, is globalism and a new world order. So it might be to somebody's great benefit to just take these, I won't call them pawns because they're better than pawns because they're tough. They might be called rooks or whatever. Take these rooks off the chessboard because the game can proceed more smoothly without them because they could be a danger down the line. And sure enough, 1.5 million of these nationalists have been eliminated from the chessboard. And you can ask yourself, who would want to get rid of 1.5 million Nazis? Figure it out yourselves. Don't expect me to tell you. If you can't figure it out, well, watch Liverpool play Arsenal a few times more. And maybe you'll figure it out then. Who knows? Anyway, Epstein would have invited a lot of these people down there. There's an old saying, there's nothing in life free. If you get the icing on the cake, well, there's a payment involved, but these fools, of course, do not understand that. Every single action they would have done on that island would be captured on video. There would be thousands of these videos stored someplace. And as in The Godfather, that senator in Nevada was going to do what he was told from that point on because the video and the pictures of him and the dead girl in the bed together, well, he's not going to forget that, you see. That is the whole focus of Epstein and his island. Anyway, Epstein must have gotten too big for his britches or whatever to decide to get rid of Epstein, and Epstein was gotten rid of, and the other Maxwell lady, she's gotten rid of as well. She's doing 20 years up in wherever in the prison, and that's the end of them. But it's always there on the back burner, and it's also very useful if there's some event coming up to gently remind these fellows that might need to be voting the correct way, that there may little be something in the background there that might make its reappearance. And sure enough, Epstein now is back in the news and everybody's focused on Epstein. The MAGA people that love Trump, they are very, very angry that Trump has not released the videos. But there's an old saying, they'll get over it. And sure enough, now I hear intelligent people uttering the same foolishness that I have heard for 4 years already. Oh, he's playing 4D chess. Oh my goodness. When I hear people saying that, I'm saying to myself, what is wrong with these people? There's only three dimensions anyway, X, Y, and Z in the graph. There is no fourth dimension, unless you perhaps call time, and that is not involved at all in this. It is just nonsense. It's almost as nonsensical as the entire 4 years that people were infatuated with Q. I don't know what Q stood for. Q was obviously a CIA funded effort, somebody pulling the urine and making fools out of everybody. I suspect they call it Q because it shows a lack of the I part of the Q, which is no IQ. And maybe that's why it's called Q. Anyway, the Epstein thing now is back in the news. Everybody is happy. The Democrats want the files produced, and the question is, why didn't they produce them when Sleepy Joe was in a semi coma for 4 years in the White House and they had the majorities in the House and the Senate? They could have produced them, but nobody wanted to produce them. The bottom line is nobody wants these produced at all, but they're all talking the talk because they're not going to be produced. Because if they were produced, the entire American political system would collapse because regular people would see what degenerates that they are voting for. And as slow as they might sometimes be, that would be the straw that might break the camel's back. So don't hold your breath on seeing any of the videos. They'll come up with some excuse. They will not show the videos because they'll say it's really child porn, etc. We cannot show it this, that, and that. Now, they could blank out the children. What we want to see is we want to see the Pat Edarys here. That's for an Irish reference, is the Pat Edarys, okay? We want to see the Pat Edarys and we want to see these people that were down there on the island. We want to see them in action and we want justice to prevail. And unfortunately, we'll be waiting a long, long time for that to happen, unfortunately. And that's a very sad thing. So that is Epstein in a nutshell. They're all talking about the tapes, releasing the tapes, but they ain't going to be released. And the Speaker of the House sent home the House of Representatives. They're gone away now for 5 or 6 weeks and it'll blow over. But it is a massive distraction. And that is that. Also, there's people that are on the brink of being called to testify with regards to these Epstein tapes. And that, of course, is to make an example of other people. Because when this disaster in Ukraine is out there and cannot be avoided anymore, when it has to be addressed, somebody has to pay a price someplace. So a big distraction will be somebody paying some serious prices, perhaps as regards the Epstein situation. Hillary Clinton is to be asked to be going before, well, no, not for Epstein. She's for the other thing. Bill Clinton is going to be asked to be given testimony, etc. And James Comey, all these big important names. And that is coming up with the Epstein. We will see what goes on. Now, the Steele dossier, this Steele refers to a British Secret Service guy anyway that was supposedly instrumental or whatever, putting this fake narrative together, whereby that the Russians are going to interfere with the American election and sort of put it into the public's mindset that Donald Trump is an asset of Putin. He is Putin's puppet. He's not Putin's puppet because if he was, he wouldn't be sending weapons over to try to kill Putin. That is obvious. But anyway, people don't want to see the obvious. So the Steele dossier has bigger issues. It's Obama that's under the limelight for that, and Hillary Clinton and others, but they're the two. Brennan is the CIA guy, but Obama and Hillary Clinton may be brought to testimony for that. The thinking is that Obama is untouchable because he would have presidential immunity. Hillary Clinton would not have immunity, so she could be touched. Uh, we will see too where that goes. But getting back to the main issue, which of course is Ukraine, the entire focus of the Ukraine war is to remove the power structure in Russia that were not going along with the game of globalism. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the oligarchs of a certain persuasion as well, needless to say, they were more or less controlling behind the scenes. They were the men behind the curtain. They, of course, need a front man because these guys are all just front men at the end of the day. The front man was that drunk Boris Yeltsin, who was okay at the beginning, but unfortunately, as drunks go, he got more drunk as the years went by. He was flying through Shannon. He was supposed to meet, I think, Barry Cowan. Barry Cowan might have been perhaps somewhat happy as well that day, or maybe it was Bertie Ahern. I forget which of them he used to meet anyway, but when he was made the stopover in Shannon, poor Boris was unable to, they weren't able to rouse Boris because he was flat out unconscious, drunk, and he went back home to Russia, and the Irish Prime Taoiseach was left looking like a fool on the tarmac. That was not such a big deal because he was looking like a fool the day before, and he was looking like a fool the day after because he was a fool. But that's another story as well. Anyway, the problem with Boris Yeltsin was he eventually was going to die, so they needed a new replacement. They decided to install this fellow, Putin, who was relatively a nobody. He was a colonel in the not GCB, the KGB. So they're going to put that fellow in there, and they're going to tell that guy what to do, and it's going to continue on. And we'll get this is a much younger guy now, and he's in good shape. We might get 25 years out of this guy, so this is looking pretty good on the face of it. But the problem was this fellow on the KGB man, Putin, he's got a mind of his own, and when he is in there, and it looks as if he has the power, it's not too complicated at all, especially if you're KGB, to actually seize the power, and that's exactly what he did. So now he's actually the real ruler of the country instead of the last guys that were just puppets doing what they're told. And needless to say, the first thing he did was he decided he would teach these oligarchs a lesson. Now he's a nice guy, so he brings all the oligarchs in. These are billionaires. They've robbed the country of its mineral resources and they've got billions of dollars. He gives them a very simple instruction. He says, "Guys, I'm a nice guy. I'm going to let you guys keep your money, do whatever you want, live it up, have nice dashes here and there and every place, and spend plenty of money. But mind your own business and do not get involved in politics, and everybody will be happy, and you can perhaps give me some money because you've got enough of it to be generous, and give me some money as well." That seems like a great deal. Some of them did exactly that, but others could not break the mold, and they insisted on pretending and hoping and trying to be the real rulers that they were some months before when they were dealing with Yeltsin. One of them, he ended up in a gulag. I don't know how many years in the gulag, if he's still in the gulag or whether he died in the gulag, I forget what it was. But he was sent to the gulag. Others escaped over to England or down to Israel or whatever with billions of dollars, and they bought a football club here and a soccer club there, and I think somebody bought Chelsea or whatever. They escaped. One guy got the gulag. I forget what happened to the other guys, but the bottom line is Putin now is in control and he is running the country, and nobody's telling him what to do. And he is a tough guy. Now, the globalists did not like this, so the problem was they wanted to get back control. They wanted to have what's known as regime change. They obviously can't invade Russia themselves because Russia has nukes and there could be a little bit of a war. That would jeopardize their long term plan and they might even get killed. So that's not in the game plan. So in 2014, you have a big country of 44 million people. It's called Ukraine. Now, believe it or not, before 1992, there was no such place as Ukraine at all. No country ever existed called Ukraine before 1992. Now it's like a country, it's somewhat similar to Yugoslavia. It's even more similar to Czechoslovakia, which in actual fact was a fake country as well, made up of two different countries. And eventually they peacefully broke away, and the Czechs went one place and they became the Czech Republic, and the Slovaks, who are different people altogether with a different language, they went to the other place, and that's the Slovak Republic. And that's what happened, should have happened to Ukraine as well, because one half of Ukraine, the people speaking Ukrainian, the other half on the eastern side of the Dnieper River, they're speaking Russian. To make the very complicated story very simple, should have just split up and everybody be happy. Anyway, the country had 44 million people. 2014, we had a Maidan um, revolution, and the pro-Russian government were replaced by a pro-Western government. And then, of course, the pro-Western government, they have their army increased with a lot of money being pumped into it from about 150,000 men to almost 650,000 men. To put that in perspective, that would mean an army in Ireland of about 80,000 people, because the population is 10 times as great, but more so too that Ireland is a much richer country. So it would have an army somewhat similar to 80 to 100,000 to be in the same league as the Ukraine per capita population. The point I'm making is it was an outlandishly large army. British army is about 160,000. This place, Ukraine, has an army of 650,000. They were built up for the sole purpose to engage in warfare to topple Russia. That's exactly what they were doing from 2014 to 2022. And about a year before 2022, Putin has had enough of this. He's coming under pressure at home because he's not protecting the Russians and he's in danger of losing his power unless he does something. He's in the exact same position as Jack Lynch was in 1969 when people were saying he should go into Northern Ireland. The difference between Putin and Jack Lynch is very simple. Jack Lynch didn't have an army to go any place, so regardless of what he might have wanted to do, didn't make any difference. Putin is a different situation. He can has the ability to do quite a lot of things. So he will have staged an army of 150,000 men on the border of Ukraine, and they will sit there for almost a year, and everybody's watching this. And the implication is, if the Ukrainians continue bombing and killing people in the Donbass, we're going to come across that border and we're going to teach you a lesson. And after a year, that's exactly what they did. They will come in across the border and they'll make significant progress. And that was February the 22nd, 2022. All right. 2 to 3 weeks later, the Russians are doing pretty good. It is decided to have a peace deal hashed out, and they'll all go to Istanbul, and they're about to make a peace deal. Some of the eastern territories will go to Russia, and we'll go back to more or less square one, and it won't be too bad. Boris Johnson went over and he said to the Ukrainians, "Don't do this. We'll support you no matter what." And they've already installed this fool, Zelensky, who will do exactly what he's told, and they'll dress him up in some camouflages. People think this Zelensky guy is a general. Or he's not even a corporal. I don't even know if he's ever in the military at all. He's a comedian that used to play the piano with his bazooka, naked. That's what he's famous for. He's just an absolute nobody. But they dress him up in the camouflage and goes to the US Capitol building and all this. It looks good, whatever. Anyway, that deal is sabotage. Now, fast forward to August 2025, and the situation on the front line is there is four towns, two small ones of about 10,000, one small one of about 20,000, and a much larger town called Pokrovets, how to pronounce these places, which has about 85,000 people. It's the same size as Galway City. And before the war, that was the pivotal town in the east of the Ukraine, which is a sort of a crossroads supplying everything to the east of it. It's a pivotal town. Now, there's nothing left to the east of it belonging to the Ukrainians anymore, so it's not really vital strategically, but it's vital psychologically, and it was heavily defended. All of those four towns slash cities are facing the exact same situation. The Russians have built up and are encircling each one of the four. Warfare now with the drones is slightly different than it was in the old days. There's no tank battles and there's none of that whatsoever. It's a sort of grinding process. Slow and steady wins the race. The Russians are using the exact same tactics that they will have used at Bakhmut and um, the other one down Masupal and all these places. It'll grind them down over time, minimizing their losses, exhausting the Ukrainians, encircling them, and eventually Ukrainians will be beaten in each of these successive towns. The mistake the Ukrainians are making is the orders will be given by the fellow in the camouflage that was not in the army at all to fight to the last man. He thinks he's Hitler in his bunker or something, with the result that the people in the military are not very happy because that's not the correct way. When you're beaten and when you're at a disadvantage, you tactically retreat and try to hope for the best and set up a new line of defense and continue on. You don't sacrifice everybody in a lost cause just to gain a little bit more time or whatever, but that's exactly what is being done. Now we're down to the wire. I expect in this month, August, that all four of those towns will be successfully captured by the Russians. And that then will open up the front all the way to the Dnieper River. And basically, it is game over, unless somebody comes in from the outside. Now, the reality will dawn on everybody then it's game over. And then the question is this Zelensky guy, he has been proven to be a disaster because now we're in a worse position. We're not going to lose two oblasts. We're not even going to lose four of them. We're going to lose seven oblasts at the least, and the Russians have nearly everything to the east. And from the American perspective, even worse, they have the territory containing the rare earth minerals, which is the big prize that the Americans had hoped to gain control of, and it is game over. And my prediction is that Zelensky will either have to escape by the skin of his teeth or the Ukrainians will string him up. And I would not want to be Zelensky at this stage. So, the big news of this August is the impending defeat of the West and how that is going to be explained away. It's going to lead to a massive hit to the value of the dollar, US treasuries, and to the psyche. I would point out that this is going to be the third and final big setback that the West has encountered in the last few years. The first one was the humiliating retreat from Afghanistan, which was so inept that it was just horrendous altogether. They actually withdrew the army before they withdrew the people. So then they had to send the army back to try to get the people out and resulted in a lot of them get killed in a chaotic. It was an example of Joe Biden being comatose. That's bad enough. But the people that's working under him are stupid. And it was just ridiculous. All the way down. Chief of Staff of the US Joint Chiefs of Staff, they're all brain dead. But that was one disaster. The second disaster was the just completed Israel Iran war. I pointed out in a video as that war was just about wrapping up that Israel had lost the war. The reason Israel had lost the war was simple. Israel lost the war because they didn't win the war. It's as simple as that. Israel, to win the war, had to hope for the regime in Tehran to collapse. It did not. So, by definition, it lost. And it actually incurred a lot of damage and the loss as well. The mullahs are still there. Israel now is much weaker and it's sort of fighting against the clock as much as anything else with Israel. Now, the only way Russia could have been defeated at the beginning of this war was if the regime in Moscow collapsed. When that did not happen after 2 to 3 weeks, it wasn't going to happen because in that situation, the resolve of the people under attack will grow. It will not weaken unless they're an unusual people. And that is the situation. Now, that wraps up how the Epstein situation is in the news. It is there both as a distraction and a club to remind people that if they don't play along with what is necessary to be said, they might be in for a rude awakening. And the same thing with the Steele dossier, which is a more complicated situation and much bigger implications as well. We'll see how that works out. Anyway, that is a long video. This is over 31 minutes, and I'm speaking off the top of my head. And thank you for listening. And that is that. We will see how this works out by the end of the month, whether I was right or not. Thank you.